Hello all, I hope you are doing well. Today we'll go over Lipschultz Chapter 8, and on the next video you'll see Lipschultz Chapter 9. Unfortunately, I couldn't fit them both on the same video. So let's get started. Lipschultz Chapter 8 goes over the big data and privacy. Here are the three vocab terms that they provide, though there are many additional ideas in laws that can be very confusing. So I would spend some time making a list of various laws that you think are going to be important for this section. We'll start off with the differences between the right to be forgotten law that was happening in the EU a number of years ago, and then our own NSA, the Security Agency Surveillance, talks about how they reserve the right to create surveillance. Many others will say that more vetting and more transparency are lacking in this process. So it was then created these 6 human dignity models. I'll go over the 6 here. Number 1, the sanction of disclosure of certain intimate private facts. Number 2, utilize and adapt existing tools. Number 3, utilize law punishing intrusions upon space, property, and personal information. Number 4, avoid initial disclosure of sensitive information. Number 5, punish defamation, including outrageous falsity. And 6, promote and support media, creating self-defining ethical standards that include new media. Many of these ideas are most likely abstract. So here is a quote, and then we'll kind of use an example in just a moment. I like the quote that privacy protection depends upon a patchwork of state and national laws, and these provide little in the way of consistency across the large global social networks like collection, organization, analysis, distribution, and use of big data is very relevant. So to sum up, how can we know if we are treating people in an ethical manner if we don't have any type of ethical manner already established? And once we do, how can we create both state and national laws that abide by these general ethical standards? Well, here's what's the problem, is that so many of these states and models of best behavior practices disagree, or they may not line up, or they may not be a good fit. I think of patchwork similarly to quilting. Many of you have never really used an actual quilt, but my mom is a quilter. In fact, here's an image from 10 years ago. These are my, this is my dad, my brother, and these were Christmas presents that my mom gave us. And if you don't know how quilting works, here's what happens. You first buy rolls and rolls and rolls and yards of fabric. You then take the fabric and you cut them up into small pieces. You then sew these pieces back together. Anyone watching this process would think that quilters are nuts, because you see this frustrating part between cutting the fabric up in perfect mathematical squares to then match other perfect mathematical squares. And once you cut something up that's already made to be together, it then doesn't always go back together well. In fact, many quilters will spend hours and hours and hours ripping up material that they just put together because they see a flaw, or they put wrong colors together, or they're not matching a design. So sometimes this machine will then break, and eventually the completed project is a blanket, and then maybe it's hung as wall art. In fact, there's an image of a quilt in the image with quilts. So quilting is really frustrating because pieces don't always fit together. They may not look good. It takes a lot of finagling, and that's a long process. Probably we don't have time to be doing this long process, because every time we start a big, long quilting project, like creating a law of best practices for Facebook, something will change. So I think when Facebook was first coming around, actually it happened to me when I was in college at Eastern, and we had to wait to get to a school email address. Once you had an actual college email address, you then could get on Facebook. So it was meant for college students. Now it opened up other possibilities that anybody with an email address could create Facebook. And then we ran into child privacy laws. At what age should a child be allowed to have Facebook? You know, is 18 the age? Is 14 the age? With 5-year-old, like, where is the appropriate age of Facebook allowing people to be using Facebook? And then you can then see other problems that are consistently arising that just are very time consuming, and that would not make for a very long quilting process like our current laws to match with the upcoming new media. Maybe you're not following this example. Think of old-time bank robbers. Once it was easy for a rob a bank and then head across state lines where they then could, in theory, be free. The transportation changed of who had jurisdiction on handling this crime. So states could gather together and join forces, and general law enforcement practices work similarly enough between state lines. So Minnesota, for example, has similar procedures close enough to Nevada that if someone were to escape from Minnesota to Nevada, the law enforcement folk would know generally who to contact and what that process would look like. So what happens then when the chaos of every state handling data is so inconsistent? This is now a procedural breakdown of who is in contact with one person, maybe with an IP listed in Nevada. What if someone in this Nevada IP commits an online stalking crime against someone in Florida? Who and how does this information get tracked? How does this information get enforced? How does it get regulated? And then who then prosecutes the criminal? Who then creates the consequences? Are Nevada laws easier than Florida laws? And then which state handles this court case? So it's very problematic. And maybe this example of a metaphor and a bank robber and a stalker are too close to the actual problem. Let's give you another example. A metaphor to describe privacy and security would be what I think is a zookeeper's job. If we have a jaguar, the jaguar should be cared for by the jaguar zookeeper. So if a jaguar escaped that enclosure, is it only the jaguar zookeeping problem? Well, no. All zookeepers now are responsible for this. It's now the additional camels zookeeper. It's now the bat zookeeper. It's now all the other snakes and the monkeys and the ostrich zookeepers. Because if it's jaguar to get out of its enclosure, their animals are now at risk. Their responsibilities are also at risk. And they're also part of the zoo as a large organization. So it's not just necessarily only the jaguar's fault, although the jaguar zookeeper should have the best policies on how to handle missing jaguars. They should have the best policies on how to capture this jaguar and then get it back. You know, maybe you shouldn't jump on the jaguar, you should entice it with some meat, or I'm not sure what the best way to capture a jaguar would be, but you get the picture here. It's the entire zoo's responsibility, although it's deemed most importantly to the jaguar zookeeper's responsibility. All government agencies are then responsible for their own material and their own dominion. Like the Patriot Act is different than the stalking laws, it's different than the child protection laws, even though they're all in one zoo or one government together. I can go on with this metaphor. You see many zoos as an issue. I can go on with this issue. Many people see zoos or places where animals are kept in enclosures as a moral issue. Should we capture and cage animals? Should we regulate and track online activity at all? There are some zoo practices or circus practices that are certainly unlawful, like the sizes of cages, not enough food, not enough nutrition, the conditions the animals face, that certainly we can all agree that that is very inhumane and more than what they should be experiencing. So I'm taking the zoo metaphor pretty far, because for us to understand some abstract regulation and security privacy laws, it helps to put it in more understanding. So here's what I want to do for the first discussion question. Make your own metaphor about how privacy and security are currently handled in the US. As a reminder, metaphors are comparisons between two unrelated objects or abstract thoughts. Why did you choose these two ideas, and then explain this metaphor's meaning? So if you pick something similar to a zoo, what does that actually look like? And how do you then see privacy and security in this example? I'll go ahead and go on to this lecture, or you can pause me here and go ahead and answer your first metaphor discussion question. Lipschultz Chapter 8 then goes on about following sites and explains their current, although depending on which version of the textbook you were reading, it listed their current policies from either 2013 or 2016. And I will say many, if not all of these policies and practices are been updated maybe February, March of this year, you probably got a lot of these emails updating the terms of service if you use any of these platforms. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these because they have changed for the most part, but you should know where they once stood in terms of their policies. So here are the list of the top social media platforms. Lipschultz explains that's Twitter, Facebook, Google+, Instagram, LinkedIn, Tumblr, Vine, though it no longer exists, and Snapchat all have various levels of terms of service in terms of conditions. So pick one of these platforms. And are you using this one? Go through the policies in the textbook and pick one aspect of their policy. You can either be using the first edition of Lipschultz or the second edition of Lipschultz and discuss positive and negative aspects of their security or data policies. Maybe you simply pick Facebook and you focus on how Facebook collects their data of what kind of material they know about Facebook users. So pick one of these platforms and pick something that sticks out to you and discuss the positive and negative aspects of that platform. Some platforms I find really surprising. Some platforms track all of your online material, like they follow your likes, the timing of your posts, the geotagging that we talked about in last week's lecture. And some of these I personally find more alarming than others. So I'll go ahead again and pause here if you want to go ahead and answer discussion question number 2, or I will continue and then you'll click on chapter 9 in just a moment. I then want to go on to a big data recap. I wish I could really put it in one main idea, but unfortunately there is no standard for big data definition. It's essentially predicting the analytics, the data mining, and the trends of what is currently out there, which I personally see as certainly problematic. Essentially, we create our own big data cloud about who we are, where we are, what we do, what we like, and what we don't like. And I also would include what we're not doing. Is it important for various users to see that we are not generally online between these certain hours, or we are online in these certain hours? So here's how I understand big data. I look at my own life. I look at my usage of my cell phone, my iPad, my laptop, my desktop at Cal State San Marcos, my other desktop at Miramar College, which is the military Marine base, and then even my TV subscriptions. And I think of all of the times I log into any one of these, anytime they are powered on, and every second of every minute that I'm using these, that's funneled into some type of data analytics. And this makes my personal data cloud. I then can think of my own usage in all of these, and I think of everyone else's clouds compiled together. This is how I understand big data. All of these high-tech devices and all the tracking and the movement that is understood makes my personal data. And then I multiply it for every person that's also on all of these devices as well. I mean, I really take this to an extreme because then I'm thinking, well, what else can be plugged in that also can be tracking me? Can my microwave track me? Can my fridge track me? Well, not yet, at least the ones that I own, but there certainly are fridges out there that track what you need, what you don't need. It can communicate with your app. You can certainly get a Nest and it controls the temperature of your house. And if you don't think that Nest is compiling a list of all the temperatures in all the houses that they have as users, you are not being aware of what's happening with big data. I mean, have you seen the Coca-Cola machines? They have these awesome machines that have some of the coolest technology. And I'll put a link up on our page, they will track every type of material that's dispensed. Like if you want Sprite, they will track a Sprite in Nashville, Tennessee at a Five Guys. They'll track that number compared to Sprite compared to all the other Sprites in the country. And so it's pretty nuts what they're doing with the Coca-Cola material. Here are future considerations that the FTC wants you to focus on, and here are 3 of them, and then we'll wrap up chapter 8. So here are some ways that we need to be considering privacy for the future. It should start at the very beginning. When we are designing the next app, the next technology, are we really being aware of the accessibility and options for data to be changed and increase security? If we're going to be making pacemakers that have tracking abilities, do we have a way for people to be opting out of this pacemaker to be tracked? Maybe someone does not want to be found if they have a pacemaker. Second, simplified choice for business and consumers. What information is shared with whom? And again, can we opt out of this material? When we're thinking about businesses, is it clear what information is shared between all these practices? Do we know of, say, Colgate is handling businesses and it has business relations with a toothbrush company? Well, what kind of information are they sharing about their toothbrush users and their toothpaste users? Is it something we care about? Maybe not. But what about something more important like our banking information? Or I recently just reapplied and renewed my passport. Well, is that information being shared with other countries about my passport being renewed? That is other considerations of what's happening with that really private data. And lastly, there needs to be greater transparency. How it gets collected, what they do with consumers' info, and what is stored about consumers are also really important. Is it important for them to know what times and what material and how I log on to these devices? Going back to when I worked at GoFundMe, you'd be surprised at how much information we would know about each of our users. When they would write into the customer support, we would see all of the account information that they would have, in addition to all of the donors' information. If you gave money and you wanted to be anonymous to the user, we would still see all of this particular banking information. And then if you think about it, if you're making a page about how your house just burnt down and how you're getting funds, maybe people have raised $5,000 for you to buy new clothes because your house was burnt down. Well, we can both see all the things you're about to buy because we now have your credit card information, and we can see all the donors who know you. So really, if it's something that's important, maybe you are a victim of stalking, maybe you are a victim of an abusive relationship. This is problematic that you think that you might be just mindlessly donating on a page to a good friend. In reality, if this could get in the wrong hands, it is traceable. So that's also something to be concerned with. And again, it's been years since I worked there. So as a quick caveat, maybe the policies, hopefully the policies, I expect the policies should have changed by now. So these are future considerations for the next tech material that you buy. These are things that should also be on your radar as you're on your own internet tracking material. I mean, look at your browsers. What kind of history are they collecting on you? Are you deleting your cookies? Are you in safe browsing mode? Are you making sure you're not checking your banking information while you are riding the bus or maybe not the bus, the train, or in a public Wi-Fi situation like you're at Starbucks? Don't check your banking information when you're at Starbucks because that Wi-Fi material goes somewhere. Someone is looking at that. And not to be all big brother or big sister on this, but it's just this level of where are we getting this data and what kind of privacy regulations are currently being created. And that is where I'm going to leave today because really, we don't quite know. There is no definition for big data. I'm going to pause here. In a moment, you can go ahead and click chapter 9, but I'll leave you the opportunity to answer the first two discussion questions.